We're the good doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Hinson.
Dr. Donnelly.
We are here with you for our Season 2 recap of Netflix's hit show, The Crown. We've done episode by episode recaps and analysis, link below.
We hope you've enjoyed them if you've seen them before.
We are filming this in advance of the upcoming season Trace, Season 3. It's here. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what Olivia Colman's going to do. I love Helena Bonham Carter. It's going to be
I'm here for Toby Menzies. Like, this is all great.
Tobias Menzies.
Yep.
I forgot. Yes. So this is a quick, what do you need to know before we start Season 3? What happened in Season 2? Effectively, otherwise known in the Good Doctor's world as the season where we got too much about Margaret.
Yeah, the season that was too much Margaret. So,
too much Margaret.
If you're looking for historical context, which, like, you really should with this show, because
a lot of things happen.
We don't, in America, and most of our viewership we know from YouTube statistics comes from America. Hello, everyone, fellow Americans.
Hi, Americans.
We're not taught modern British history.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of things. The Suez Crisis, we had to look it up. The Profumo affair, we had to look it up. We'll have a link below with all of...
Vulture is your gift with this show.
They're here for it.
Because they just list stuff.
They broke down everything that takes place in Season 2, they put Beatlemania, because I think they wrote this before the season.
We don't do Beatlemania in the show.
But everything else we do, it's all in there. But the meat of the season
is
are...
people.
Two sets of relationships, Elizabeth and Philip, and Margaret and her new beau, played by the lovely Matthew Good, Anthony Armstrong-Jones. That's the guts of it.
So our main complaint was for Season 1 and was also for Season 2, that for a show ostensibly about the Queen of England,
The Crown,
it is very frequently about everybody else in her life but
There's
her.
only one person that wears that crown, BT Dubs.
BT Dubs. The show is a lot more interested, and Peter, what's his face, who created it? Morgan? Yeah. Hey, I got there.
I was going to say Sheridan, so
yeah, for a minute, So, Peter Piper. So Peter Morgan is very clearly much more interested in the people, in how the crown affects the people in her life.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating show. It's not the one I'm interested in.
It's not the one I was sold.
And it's not, and as we drag on, it's more like, I just feel like they wasted a lot of Claire Foy. And I'm worried they're going to waste Olivia Colman. If you are unfamiliar with Olivia Colman, one, welcome to your new best friend.
She's amazing.
If you like British television at all and have not seen the show Broadchurch, it's on Netflix. Find it immediately, tuck in, enjoy. This will also potentially introduce you to a fellow named David Tennant.
I mean, I can't fathom worlds in which people don't know David Tennant, but I'm sure it exists.
It exists. It will also introduce you to Jodie Whittaker, and welcome. Broadchurch is a great gateway drug to modern British actors.
It is. Yeah. Pretty much everybody who's anybody in recent modern British
is either
television.
in Harry Potter or Broadchurch.
Yeah.
So we bring up Olivia Colman because she is going to be playing Queen Elizabeth in seasons 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
And we know that they're still interested in the relationship between her and her sister Margaret, because they cast Helena Bonham Carter, who is one of the best humans at chewing scenery that the current world produces.
She's a fantastic character.
She just digs in and goes for it. And it's going to be incredibly entertaining to watch her.
Yeah.
I don't care about Margaret.
Not as much. Maybe other people do. Do you guys care about Margaret?
Yeah, could you let us know if you're into Margaret? Because here's my thing. I would be super into Margaret if I could get a voiceover or a diary or something from Elizabeth telling me how she feels about Margaret.
Well, and that is one of our primary criticisms for seasons 1 and 2.
Probably seasons 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 12. Yeah. Is
that we don't get
in her head
a lot from Elizabeth's perspective. And we understand that you can't know a lot from Elizabeth's perspective because they're very, very secretive. She's not one to give interviews and to tell her personal side a lot. But you know what? The show is fiction, and we all know it's fiction. Make it up.
They took enough liberties.
Do a voiceover.
Figure something out.
It was a lot of fantastic face work from Claire Foy, but I would like to know more about why these relationships are significant, how she feels about it, rather than just skirting the edges. There was a lot of guesswork. How does this affect the person who wears the crown?
And I
didn't appreciate that when that's what I kind of wanted to know more about.
And even in opportunities where we know, like, where Elizabeth's words could have been in her mouth, they're put in other people's. So, like, for instance, we learned that it's very difficult for her to be a mother to Charles because he is her heir. We don't learn that from Elizabeth. We learn that from
Philip's private secretary.
That's something that we easily could have learned from Elizabeth in a conversation to her sister.
Why couldn't she have had that conversation?
The other reason we get frustrated with with Margaret and then Elizabeth's husband, Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, is that they both don't seem to understand that they are related to the Queen of England.
And that she didn't choose this.
She didn't want this. She never wanted this.
She didn't want this. We learn a lot more in season 2 about the impact of the abdication. For those of you that don't know, Elizabeth's uncle, David,
the Nazi,
the not-so-secret Nazi, was King of England. He abdicated so that he could marry an American, Wallis Simpson, thus making her father the king, thus putting her in line for the throne. This happens when she is 8, but she had spent her first 8 years of her life just being happy, and her father never wanted to be king, never thought he was going to be because he wasn't the firstborn, and she never wanted to be queen. It is not fitting her personality and how she wants to engage with the world. She wanted to be a country housewife and have dogs and horses.
That was her life.
That is it. And we know all of this about her.
Because that's one of the things she's not secretive about.
And yet, we see the two most important people in her life, her sister, only surviving, like, sibling, it's the only one she has, her sister, who's known her whole life, and her husband, both be like, well, you don't have to be the queen. Like, you don't have to follow the rules of the monarchy. You can do it. No, she has to.
The only person in this entire season who seemed to give an actual crap about Elizabeth Windsor, the human being, was Billy Graham.
Right.
Honestly. The entire season. So what you need to know going into season 3 is that we're moving into the 60s.
Yes. The relationship between Elizabeth and Philip has settled a bit.
So throughout the first bit of their marriage, Philip really struggled with his ego.
And his role.
And he decided to spend a lot of time pursuing affections of other people rather than his wife, both female sexually and male friend-wise. There was a lot of scandals, and that still remain. Like, if you know anybody who grew up in the UK, they have feelings about Prince Philip. Many of them are based on actions he took at the beginning of their marriage. It's like a not so secret thing that he cheated on her at least twice. It's not so secret that he had friends that were not great people. It's not so secret that he wasn't a good dad for a long time. Like, that kind of stuff, like, that you can't confirm, but everybody knows. And The Crown deals with a lot of that. So that's what you need to know. You also need to know that Philip's an orphan, essentially, and comes from not a great family. And by not a great family, we don't mean like that they were necessarily like criminals, although they were Nazis, but they were terrible to him. And he has no real understanding of emotional connection. That's the argument that the show makes, which would very much explain some of the choices that he makes with Charles and then with Andrew and Anne, and Edward, the other children, by the way. Because I don't know if you know this, because we don't really talk about it in America, but Queen has 4 kids.
Yes. Charles, Anne, Andrew, Edward.
So this Duchess of York, Fergie, that you've heard so much about, married to one of the other kids. Andrew. She was married to Andrew. Princess Eugenie, who wore the really weird fascinator to Kate's wedding, but has since cleaned up her fascinator act and gotten very married. Granddaughter of the Queen. So it's a bigger family than just Charles, Will, Kate, Meghan, and Harry. I know it doesn't seem
Surprise!
Shock!
Surprise!
And by all accounts, it's a very complicated family, which when you spend as much time with Philip over the last 2 seasons as we have, is not surprising.
Oh, I get it.
Not surprising that it's a complicated family dynamic. What we also learn is that Margaret is as a human being suited for the attention that the Queen gets.
But not the responsibility.
Not the
politics,
temperament.
Not the temperament. She just wants to be in front of everybody being adored. She thinks that's what being the queen is. She's wrong. If
you've ever seen the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, which you should if you haven't, it's an absolutely classic retelling of Taming of the Shrew.
It's a charmer.
There's a point in which one of the characters said, "I enjoy being adored, thank you very much." And that is exactly what I think the soundtrack is in Margaret's head all the time. I enjoy being adored. Thank you very much.
But we get a little bit more about her complicated relationship with Elizabeth, and the two of them, and their relationship with their father, which was both very different, especially after their father became king. So that is interesting in and of itself, and their perceptions of each other as women and members of this family, and perpetually wanting to be the center of attention, but never being as important as her sister, has likewise impacted Margaret in the same way family dynamics impacted Philip, which leads into the major relationship of her life, her marriage to Anthony Armstrong Jones, which we get is a huge arc in this season as well. So we understand a lot more about her as a person, and her relationship with her family, and why her and Anthony both chose this marriage. Which, if you care about it and you were interested in it,
God bless.
Bully for you. I was waiting to hear more about the crown.
Yeah, I played a lot of Candy Crush when Margaret was on stage. So the final thing we'd like you to know, for people who haven't really seen this, or you watched it when it was out, a little bit of a recap. So politically,
yes,
we are in post-war Britain.
Mm-hmm. Post-Second World War.
Post-Second World War. What happened psychologically to the politics in Britain in the Second World War is that they went from being generally the most powerful country in the world to having nothing, no money, no infrastructure, no agriculture, no nothing.
They were on rations for 6 years afterwards.
It was not great.
It was not stable.
Not great. So they have Winston Churchill kind of get them through the war and the first little bit after the war. Now, anyone who has ever met anyone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s may be aware that they tend to be fairly intractable in their views. Winston Churchill was no different. So one of the double-edged swords of Winston Churchill is that he wanted the world to be the way that it was in 1920, but he was also decent enough to make sure that the English people could eat. So, he's a double-edged sword. Most even good politicians are double-edged swords. But he was Elizabeth's first prime minister. And this is how when we get forward and maybe we meet Tony Blair, she treats Tony Blair like she very much treated Churchill, and that's a little bit of a thing. That's her model. After Churchill came some very, very poor prime ministers. Very ineffectual,
Anthony,
very poor.
We learn a lot about Anthony Eden, unfortunately.
He should have never had power.
And is involved in the Suez Crisis at the beginning of this season. And we go through a series of ineffectual leaders, men who are kind of thrust into a leadership position because of these continuing political crises in England, and aren't really suited for the job. And honestly, I don't know how you follow the legacy of Winston Churchill.
But not how Anthony Eden did it, is the answer.
And Macmillan.
Yeah.
Macmillan followed Eden, and he, those are the ones we get in this. Hope we're getting more interesting. Yeah. And certainly better prime ministers in the third season, I know, coming up. So that is... Internal British politics is always a huge part of this show, that weaves its way into a lot of things. There's a lot of things Dr. Donnelly and I, even having lived in the UK, didn't understand and didn't know. So our best advice, as always, is to look things up. The show doesn't do a fantastic job of explaining it.
Which it doesn't need to.
I think their central concern is their central thought is that their main audience are people who understand the British public and the diaspora thereof. But we also get some politics in kind of the end of colonialization and the changing of the British control over all of these places that were colonies, and the growth of the Commonwealth.
This is a massive shift in the UK's position in the world in this period. And Elizabeth is reigning over that. And in a very real way, she is actually probably the one that is the most educated and most qualified to lead all of these changes if they would let her. So she struggles with trying to do the right thing desperately, but then also being hamstrung by some of the constitutional monarchy boundaries and having to trust these men that she knows are idiots. And it's after Churchill. So it's a very complicated thing, and there's so many times I just wanted to hug her. Pour up hymns.
If only
and
that
hug her.
If only that was something we could do. But I think that's the main thrust of this series. British politics, Margaret, Elizabeth, Philip, some international politics. We get the Suez Crisis. We get some things happening in Ghana and other parts of Africa that come into this. So that's what you need to know going into season 3. What happens in season 3?
We'll be here for it with you.
We will be here for.
We can't wait.
We're so excited. We will be back next with our recap and analysis of season 3, episode 1. But for now, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Hinson.
I'm Dr. Donnelly.
And we'll see you for season 3.
Yay!
Bye!